It's springtime in Chicago, and we all trying to get back outside. And come on, spring has got to include at least one trip to Navy Pier. It's still an ultimate Chicago destination, y'all. No matter the occasion, they got something for everybody. The Children's Museum, Chicago Shakespeare Theater, the Centennial Wheel. Honestly, you'd be shocked by how long this list is, but we kinda gotta get to the show. Plus, there's tons of free programming, and you can get discounts and other benefits with the Pier Passport. Visit NavyPier.org to see what's happening this spring and plan your next adventure. Today on CityCast Chicago, we finally expecting a little bit of sun this weekend. I don't know about you, but for me, sunny days in Chicago means spending some time around Lake Michigan. But before you head for the beach, the trail, riding the bike, executive producer Simone Ali is here with an interview about how Chicago got its lakefront and some of the most interesting experiences you can have in and around the water. It's Thursday, April 10th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about.
Joining us today is WTTW's Jeffrey Bear, who is hosting the new special out on Monday, touring Chicago's lakefront. Jeffrey, welcome back to CityCast Chicago.
I'm always happy to be on your show.
We're glad to have you. So I got to just start with a basic question that I'm sure will be very difficult. What is your favorite spot along the lake in Chicago? The one that you go to again and again?
No, that really is almost an impossible question to answer. For many, many years, I've been a sailboat racer. I don't own a sailboat. Best kind of racing, other people's boats. But I do love the harbors along the lakefront. And most recently, I was sailing out of Belmont Harbor.
How fast do you go when you're racing a sailboat?
Well, that's I love when we have people on the sailboat for the first time, because if it's a windy day and you're like out on the rail, sitting on the side of the boat, the wake is spraying you. You feel like you're going like 70 miles an hour, and I always lean over to the person and I say, you could ride a bike faster than this.
Really? So it's not nearly as fast as it feels?
Oh, no, not nearly. I mean, it's very dramatic, but in your, like on a good day, you might be doing 8 knots, maybe 9.
Well, that is, I think, a pretty quintessential lake example. You're really out there in the middle of it. In the time I've lived in Chicago, I've been lucky enough to always live by the lake. It's a big reason that I moved here. But if Jacoby were here, he would point out that there are a lot of Chicagoans who live farther inland, for whom the lake isn't really part of their like day-to-day Chicago life. So just how integral to Chicago is the lake, like its existence and just city life in general?
Well, whether you know it or not, if you're in Chicago, your life depends on it. We draw all of our drinking water from the lake. We're very reliant on the lake, not only for drinking water, but, I think for just our origin story. Chicago is where it is because it's at the meeting point of Lake Michigan and a system of waterways that, Native Americans used to get to the Mississippi and, down to the Gulf of Mexico. And this was the connection that the early non-native settlers who came to Chicago were shown and knew about, and realized that this was going to be a key center point of the most important trade route in the country, and the key to it was digging a little canal across a continental divide that's just west of the city that was the only missing link in an uninterrupted waterway from the East Coast all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And they started digging this canal in the 1820s, and it made Chicago, instantly the fastest growing city in the world, brought, real estate speculators and so forth. So, the whole reason Chicago's here is because of its placement on the lake.
One of the first stories you tell in the special is the story of Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable, considered sort of the founder of modern Chicago, and how it was at sort of the mouth of the lake and the what became the river where he made his settlement.
That's right. And, it's important to say exactly what you said, the founder of modern day Chicago, because indigenous people have known about this for centuries. DuSable was the first, what people say is he was the first permanent resident of Chicago. So the native peoples tended to be here part of the year and not here part of the year. There were missionaries here before DuSable, French missionaries, who established missions and may have stayed year-round once or twice. But DuSable really settled here and built a trading business right at the mouth of the Chicago River. Earlier representations of him were, that he built this sort of rude cabin on the lakefront, which I think had a lot to do with the fact that he was not a white settler. But he had quite a business, and he had really a lakefront estate with livestock and outbuildings and, beautiful architecture, glass doors on his home, which out on the frontier to have sort of French glass doors on your home, like crazy. So he was quite the entrepreneur. He was very much aided in his success by marrying a native woman, Kittihawa, who was really his link to the native peoples who he traded with.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting I think it's really important to establish, like I said, just the importance of the lake and how crucial it is to Chicago. Watching the special, it really kind of felt like a trip through some of my favorite spots in the city, some of my favorite stories and history that I have heard over the years. What was the most surprising thing you learned or the most surprising experience that you had?
So I've been making these shows for 30 years on WTTW, and several of them we've made more than once, because what happens is, we rerun the shows for years and they become outdated. I look older, things have changed. So this is the third time we've done a show about the lakefront. The first one was in 1998. I think the second one was like 2008. And what we really thought about, we hired a great producer. His name is Mike West. And Mike and I really talked about, let's do things we've never done before. So a lot of this show is surprises to me, too, like things I've never done before. And so the biggest one, I think, is the shipwreck right off of 47th Street on the south side. You could swim to it from shore. It's only about a few hundred yards offshore, although you would need to be a really strong swimmer and do it in calm weather. And it's only about 8 feet underwater. Depending on the lake level, it can be even, part of it even pokes up above the water. I'm not a scuba diver. I don't have the first idea how to scuba dive, but I can put on a snorkeling mask. And I literally snorkeled a shipwreck off of the lakefront, which blew my mind. We go to the South Shore Cultural Center, which used to be the South Shore Country Club down in the neighborhood of South Shore. It has a rodeo.
We actually went in 2021. We went and did an episode out there.
Oh, great! Did you interview
Murdoch, the man without
no last name?
Yep. Yes, we did. I remember standing there. We were out there for hours because I was trying to get a horse whinny on mic. I was out there like, come on, give me a whinny. Give me a neigh.
Yes, we were out there for many hours, too, because Murdoch, the man with no first name, doesn't really have any limitation to how much he wants to get into the event. So it was a long event. But it's wonderful. He works with these mostly African-American kids. I could not. So it really was my first rodeo. And I could not believe these kids were like they little kids, and they're tearing around the race course and these barrel races. The horses look like they're going to break their ankles going around the barrels. I just couldn't believe my eyes. So that was another thing I'd never done before. I went fishing on the lake. I've never gone fishing before. I said to the fishing boat captain, this is TV. I mean, I hope we catch a fish. And he said, we've never come back without a fish. And I said, well, there's always a first time. But, oh my gosh, we must have caught like a dozen fish. And these are like big fish, like big salmon and big trout, and I'd never gone bird watching before, and we went down.
You
and
caught the
saw
plovers. You actually
We did.
You actually got to see them
Oh, yeah.
pop out, which doesn't always happen. I've been out there a couple times. Yeah.
No, they were there, and the bird watchers, the birders, were amazing people. And I met the person who named Monty and Rose, Monty and Rose. She's very proud of it.
Navy Pier is the place to kick off the spring season. If you ain't been in a while, what you doing? Navy Pier is an ultimate Chicago destination. Yes, even for Chicagoans, I'm born and raised here, and I still love the magic of the fireworks. For real, no matter who you are, I bet Navy Pier has something for you to enjoy. You looking for family fun? They got the Children's Museum, obviously, but there's also the flyover. You can get sweet treats like Garrett's popcorn or my favorite Kilwins. You looking for art and culture? What about the Chicago Shakespeare Theater? Plus, there's other live concerts and art exhibitions like the Free Global Connection series, Mexico Fest starting May 2nd. Oh, I don't know if y'all ever been to the Lowrider Festival. You looking for a date night? When the last time you been at the top of Centennial Wheel? Peak romance. Go on and pair that with the Rooftop Bar Offshore or other favorites like Lyrica or Bar Soul. And if you like Kobe, I actually want to do all of this. I got you. Check out the Pier Passport for discounts and other benefits. Visit NavyPier.org to see what's happening this spring and plan your next visit.
I think that's one thing about the lake and the lakefront that we in Chicago, a lot of us don't really realize is just how wild it is. We love the parks and, you know, the lakefront and our concrete beaches and all these things. But I think we forget about, you know, there's wildlife out here. There are wild animals, and this is a current, and this is a, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't strike a lot of us as especially outdoorsy unless you're already doing that kind of stuff.
That's right. The lakefront in Chicago is entirely human-made. It's been pushed hundreds of yards out into the lake as part of the 1909 Burnham Plan. So it's all artificial parkland. But despite that, you know, nature reclaims a lot of it or uses a lot of it. So, you know, this up at Montrose, where they built a little protrusion, and that used to be, for a long time, that was a missile base during the Cold War. And they built a hedge around it to sort of, not disguise it, but, you know, keep people from being able to look in there and see what was going on. And this hedge started sort of just growing on its own and attracted more birds. And then I think one year they didn't groom Montrose Beach the way they normally do, and a dune just started spontaneously growing there, and so now they've let it continue to grow. And then, of course, Northerly Island, which is another thing in the show that I had not done before. You know, people would remember that as Meigs Field. I actually loved that little airport. I'm kind of an aviation.
Really?
Oh yeah, I'm an aviation nut. So
okay,
I used to love to go down there and watch the airplanes take off and land. And I've actually flown into Meigs a couple times for TV things that we did, and that's like unbelievable. So I was kind of sorry to see it go, but it's been totally, you know, reclaimed by nature with wildflowers and things. And, you know, it's kind of remote, so people not very many people go there. And I hadn't gone there before, exploring the sort of, you know, reclaimed nature. And so that was, it's very wild.
Yeah, the Meigs Field story is another one of my favorite stories of the middle of the night repaving. It's just daily being daily.
The Chicago way.
Truly one of the prime examples. But then, as you point out, you get this little oasis out of it, which is not usually how that story goes all the time.
No, I mean, and unfortunately, you know, Jeannie Gang did the design for it, and it's never been really fully realized. I suppose for budgetary reasons, it's still kind of a little haphazard there. But it's very natural, you know, it feels like you're out in a natural area.
I think that's one of the interesting things I took away from the special is kind of the way politics and nature or just the way it all kind of comes together. I mean, you talk about the 1919 riots, you talk about the Memorial Day massacre of 1937 down on the southeast side, the 1968 DNC, right, and Grant Park. It's interesting because I sort of knew, I'm aware of all of these historical stories, but had kind of never put together, the fact that they happened on the lake, like the fact that it's kind of part of the lakefront's history too.
Yeah, Memorial Day Massacre was along the Calumet River, but not far from the lake. And the other two were basically right on the lakefront, the horrible 1919 race riots. That's another thing, when you asked about what's, different or new this time. We'd done the lakefront twice before as TV specials for WTTW, and we didn't talk about the race riot, And I thought this time, and I think a lot of our work here over the years has evolved where, we want to tell a full story. And the race riot is a terrible, terrible thing that happened on the lakefront, but it's part of the lakefront story. And we didn't want to shy away from it. And similarly with the thing I kind of love about the 1968 Democratic National Convention and the big police riot that happened in Grant Park was, you flash forward 40 years in the very same spot where all those anti-war protesters were, massing to march on the Democratic National Convention. You have this massive celebration of President Obama right there on the same spot. And I kind of loved that.
So after doing this for the third time, what do you think is the most underrated, slept on part of the lake?
Oh, well, I got to see some places that I haven't seen before. And if you go down to the beach at 95th Street, much like on the north side up at Montrose, they've created a really beautiful natural area down there. So you go to the beach and you sort of head a little bit to the south, and all of a sudden you're walking on this boardwalk through a kind of a man-made wetland and out to a point where you can look out at the skyline of Chicago in one direction and the water treatment plant in the other direction. It's really, really beautifully done. So that is a real hidden gem down on the south side, and probably not visited as much as people would just go to the beach. I do think the shipwreck is really, you really shouldn't do it unless you're a very, very good swimmer. But it's so crazy that we have this outcropping of limestone that pops up above the surface of above the bottom of the lake, only about 8, 10, 12 feet underground, under the lake surface. That, this is a part of a limestone, massive limestone, was part of a prehistoric coral reef that extends all the way to Niagara Falls.
That fact, when I saw that pop up, and it was like, by the way, Chicago used to be on the equator. Chicago, 425 million years ago, right. I think it was.
Yes. The Silurian period.
Chicago used to be on the equator, and we had a coral reef, and it blew my mind, that idea.
And I'll tell you one other, which is Calumet Fisheries down on the south side along the Calumet River, essentially west of the Skyway, with their smokehouse that's been the same little smokehouse since 1928 or something. What a place that was. I just loved visiting Calumet Fisheries, and the people who work there are they know what they have. They know this is a young local neighborhood guy who works there, and he knows and feels the importance of the history of that place, and that smokefish is just out, beyond belief. It's great.
That's no joke. So do you think there's enough to do a fourth special about the lakefront?
What happens is Chicago is such a dynamic city that things just keep changing. And so if I'm still doing this 10 years from now, I think undoubtedly we would do it again, because even if a lot of the history doesn't change, but so much else does change. And it is why we've had to do a number of these shows over again as time has passed, because I just think the city is ever changing. And so there probably would be a reason and a need to do it again.
Jeffrey Bear, host of Touring Chicago's Lakefront on WTTW. Thank you so much again for taking the time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Some good news. This Friday, Oakton College is hosting Creating Justice, an annual celebration of art and social justice movements. Y'all, they got so much going on. Things like printmaking workshop, hip-hop identity and cultural preservation, button making workshop, and so much more. Free refreshments, dinner, live music. I'm going to drop a link for you in the show notes. All you got to do is register. As always, we appreciate you for listening, reading, becoming a member of CityCast Chicago. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.
I also went to NASCAR.
Yes. Yes.
Quite a scene. I don't quite know how I feel about it either, but it was pretty darn cool being there and seeing these cars go speeding by at crazy speeds.
I gotta say, I don't feel like they were going that much faster than people normally go on Lakeshore Drive. I feel like it was about the same.
In some places you are entirely right. I actually was just talking to a friend of mine the other day who got a ticket for going 80 miles an hour on Lakeshore Drive, but not 110 miles an hour on Lakeshore Drive.